Hello, welcome to today's video. Please excuse the mess in the background. We are going home very soon and things are just a mess. I have so much to film, so much to pack, and yeah. But anyways, today we are kind of going through my favorite shades and palettes. I tried my best to kind of order them in the least exciting to most exciting. I don't know if I did the best job because it's really hard to do that. I almost wish I didn't challenge myself to do that. But let's start with some of the more boring shades and then we'll work up to more exciting shades. So first up is this little guy here. My favorite shade in this palette is this gold shade here. I also have filmed separate clips of me swatching these so that hopefully the swatches will be much better. So I'm going to be pointing these out and then showing you the actual color. So this is a nice gold shade. Like I said in my previous ranking my eyeshadows video, this palette was an early purchase for me, and so it doesn't really serve much of a purpose in my collection anymore. But at the time it was nice to have some gold shades and that kind of thing. But this gold was one that I put a little bit of a dip in because it was just kind of my go-to. And so yeah, that is the first one. Next up is this Gigi Hadid palette. This is just an all matte, very boring palette, but actually the quality on this is very good. My very favorite shade here is this kind of light pink tone. I really enjoy that shade. These shades are very soft, and I find that even though it looks kind of pink in this little palette here, it actually is more brown in undertone, and I don't know, I just think this shade kind of flatters my skin tone and I enjoy wearing it. Next up, I have my NYX Happy Birthday palette, and from this one I chose this green shade right here. And to me, this is not the most exciting green, but at the same time, it's nice. It is beautiful. It's kind of got a cool undertone to it, which I think is kind of fun. But yeah, that is the one from the Happy Birthday palette from NYX. Next up, I have a couple Makeup Revolution palettes, and this is just the Shade and Light dupe. And the one I picked is this shade right here. It's just the warm transition color. I'm such a sucker for transition colors, and I really like that warm undertone. So that one is the shade from this palette. The one that I like the most for my next Makeup Revolution palette is this orange one here. And I think that, this whole palette leans very red and orange, but I think this is probably the most unique orange out of the whole palette. So to me, that is why I'm always drawn to it so much. And so yeah, I also just really like orange shadows. So there's that one. Next up is my Athena palette, and I don't love this palette on the whole, but honestly one of the reasons why I haven't been able to declutter it yet is because I really love this power shade here. This deep red is just special to me, and I don't know, I think it's very good. The mattes in this palette are actually really good. I just don't like the shimmers. But yeah, that is my favorite shade from the Athena palette. Next up is my Natural Eyes palette, and in this palette, my favorite shade that I use the most probably is this Push Up shade. I think it's kind of nice bronzy color, but it's not just a typical bronze. There's kind of this rose undertone, I guess. If I'm not very good at describing those, but I really do enjoy that shade quite a bit. The next palette is my Natural Matte palette here, and this one I really enjoy this Honey Butter shade down here. It's very pretty. Again, you can really tell that I have a real preference for these warm transition colors, and that is one that I really enjoy reaching for. Coming from this little Lancome palette, this is just a little 5-pan palette. I think it came as a sample. Someone gifted this to me, they weren't gonna use it, and I had never tried Lancome shadows. And I have to say, I really like these I really like these little shimmers here. So I think I ended up swatching this one here, the tiny one. It's a little bit more glittery, and yeah, this one has a nice cool undertone. It's got some really nice cool tones in general, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the amount of use that I've gotten out of this and how much I've actually really liked these cool tones in this little 5-pan palette. My favorite coming out of the Natasha Denona Mini Lila palette would definitely be this blue one here, and I believe that's the shade called Blue Dahlia. It's such a beautiful shade. It's very deep, it has a dark base, and I think that it wouldn't work with a lot of looks, but I love to wear it in a halo eye with these purples, and I really just enjoy this shade quite a bit. Coming out of my Marvelous Mauves palette, I really enjoyed this middle color. It's kind of, it's the mid-tone in the palette. I really like all of these shades, but if I have to choose a favorite, it would be this one here in Wishy Washy. I really think it's just a beautiful, very cool tone, very mauve. It is what it is. So it is very beautiful, and that's my favorite from this palette. My favorite coming out of My Little Pony palette from ColourPop. Okay, I think if I remember correctly, I swatched 2 from this palette, so I did break the rules a little bit. And a couple palettes where I really had a hard time deciding what my favorite shade was, I picked more than one. So in this palette, I believe I picked this purple and this blue, and I think it's so hard to figure out which shade from the back is actually translates to the front. But if I have my guess, it's Sky Dancer and Firefly. So again, these purple and this blue, it's really minty, icy blue, and the purple is like a nice lavender kind of shimmer. I really enjoyed that. My favorite shade coming from my Little Pony Pure palette would be, I think I also swatched 2 here. I definitely did Pinkie Pie, which is this matte pink shade, and then Tempest Shadow, which is this matte red shade. I really enjoy the matte formula in this palette, but I really don't love or even really like the shimmer shades, but the mattes to me are so special. And that pink one is just, it's so beautiful. I think it has like this cool, it really has this cool almost blue undertone to it, and I think it makes it even brighter and stand out on my skin tone, and I really like that. And then red is just biased. I really like red shadows like a lot. And my favorite shade coming from my NYX Ultimate Bright palette would definitely be this green down here. It's very beautiful. It actually builds up pretty well, and I think that it's just that bright, vibrant green that I want. I wish these qualities of these shades overall were a little bit better, but when I reach for this palette, I always kind of like struggle because I want to make a green look, but then I need to make myself use some of the other colors some more, but sometimes it's hard to convince myself to do that. My favorite shade coming out of the Take Me Back to Brazil palette is definitely this yellow here right in the middle, and I just think this is a nice like kind of a mac and cheese yellow. I do have to build it up quite a bit. It's not the most impactful shade, but I do like in the past when I've used or wanted really yellow eyeshadows, this is one that I have reached for. And from my Lorac Shine Bright palette, my favorite in this palette would be Fizz, and it's this kind of, again, bronzy, coppery tone, but it's definitely more cool tone. If you'll notice, Splendor beside it is definitely more warm. Fizz, it's got that like cool rosy, or not rosy, but bronze tone, but on the cool side, and I just think that out of this palette, that is the most unique, and that's why I enjoy it the most from this palette. My favorite from this Lorac Pirates of the Caribbean palette would definitely be, I think I also swatched 2 here. I think I did Sea Haze, which is this really pretty green. It's a very cool green. It's a little bit more unique. It's not that forest green, but it's also not like a minty green. I think it's just this cool kind of mid-tone green. And then the other one that I swatched, which I'm not sure is actually going to look great in the swatches, but it's this Black Pearl shade here. This is a really cool like dark base, but it has a blue shift to it. And I have such a fun time wearing that on my eyes. I do have to be really careful not to blend it out. If you blend it out too much, you lose that blue shift that makes it special. But if I use my finger and tap it onto my eye the right way, blend, and then go back on and tap and make sure that I layer it properly, it's the most beautiful duochrome smoky eye, and I really enjoy that from this palette. From my Lorac Mega Pro 4 palette, I actually picked 2 shades, and I ended up picking this denim shade. I think it's so special. It's very beautiful. And then I also picked Fairy Tale here, which is this very pretty blue silvery like shimmer shade, and it's very like impactful. It packs a lot of punch. I really enjoy those 2 shades. My favorite shade from this Lorac Mega Pro 2 palette is actually, it's one that, even though the palette as a whole is not my favorite like color palette from Lorac, this shade Olivine down here is stunning. It's kind of shimmery, or it's shimmery, duh, but it's got this green tint to it, but it's not too green. I don't know, it's just special. It's kind of like a green bronze, if that makes sense, and a silver almost. I just think it's really special, and I think that they've really made a smart decision to include like a dark green up in the corner. I really love those 2 together. I was wearing that combo earlier this week, and that is definitely my favorite shade from this Lorac palette. Okay, from this Weekend Festival palette, I think I ended up picking 3 shades when I was filming swatches. And if I did, it was definitely this light pink one here called Electric, and then Dippy here is this bright, really like magnetic pink, and then the other one down here, Neon, is this nice shimmery like neon green color, and I really love this palette. This palette is so fun and so inspiring, and the quality of these shades is insane. I love this bright pink. It offers something so different than Dippy, so even though the 2 shades in this palette that are some of my favorites are these pinks, they're so different from each other, and they look so different on the eyes that I think it's just so smart for them to have included that in this palette. And of course, I just love a lime green. I actually really love all those shades together, so those 3 are definitely faves for me from this palette. My favorite coming from my Morphe 35M palette is definitely this shade here, and I actually do not have the name inserts on me right now, so I won't be able to tell you the exact shade, but it's just this really nice shimmery like olivey green. But this shade is a little lighter and it's a little bit more useful to me in the way that I do my makeup. I just prefer a light shimmery shade typically on my eye, like either on my lid or in the center of a halo eye. I don't really tend to use a lot of like dark shimmers, but this one is definitely my favorite from this palette. My favorite coming from this Lorac Pro 3? Yes, I always forget which one this is. My favorite from this palette is definitely this medallion shade, and I think I keep calling these bronzes, even though I don't think bronze is the best way to describe this shade. This one is kind of like a bronzy gold, and I just love this for the fact that when I put this on my lid, it's a little chunky. I enjoy a chunky shade, and it makes it look like I tried, even if I'm only wearing something in my crease and that on my eyelid. Like, I just think it looks really put together, and it's so easy that this palette is so neutral. It's so easy to pair like a bold lip with this palette, and that is definitely my favorite shade from this palette. My favorite shade coming from my Jacqueline Hale palette has got to be this yellow here. I actually don't remember what it's called either, but yeah, this yellow I think is special. Every time that I want to pull and create a look from this palette, I typically have to talk myself out of using that shade. And today I am wearing this palette. I am wearing this purple on my inner and outer corner, this shade here in the center of my halo eye, and then this in my crease. But regardless, that yellow is definitely my favorite in this palette. My favorite shade from the Saharan by Juvia's Place is definitely got to be this, I hope I'm saying this right, Wadobe shade. Such a beautiful like greeny gold, and it's so intense, and I think that it is paired smartly with this palette, because if you really like use a lot of these dark orange shades and pop that on your lid, it stands out so much and it's so beautiful. So yeah, that is definitely my favorite shade from this palette. Okay, my favorite shade coming from this Pure Grinch palette is definitely this green glitter here called Mr. Grinch. That is definitely why I got suckered into like wanting and asking for this palette for Christmas last year, and I have to say I am not disappointed by it. I love that green shade. It's so vibrant, so perfect for not only Christmas, but like any time of the year that you want like a really beautiful popping green eyeshadow look. That's the one I reach for. I love it so much. And my favorite from my Morphe 3502 palette, you've heard me say this over and over and over, but these two here, the matte red and the red shimmer, again, I don't have the name inserts, so, but I do want to say that like one of them is definitely named Ruby. Like, that's how much I love these shades. That's for some reason the name of it stuck in my brain somehow. But yes, those two right there are so daggum special from this palette. I love this so much. And from the Modern Renaissance palette, I think I ended up picking two favorites here. And I definitely picked Burnt Orange because even though it's not the most exciting shade in this palette, it is one that I constantly reach for. I use it so often, like whenever I'm traveling or creating, if I want a warm, like neutral look, that is the one I pull for. I pull this palette out specifically for that shade, so I can't leave that one out. And then the other favorite in this palette for me, I think I swatched, is Antique Bronze. I never thought I would love like a brown, almost shimmery satin kind of shade, but this shade to me is very special. If I want like a brown smoky eye, this is one that out of my whole palette collection, this is the one I typically pull for the most, because I just think there's something special about it, and those two shades are definitely the ones I reach for most out of this palette and the ones that I enjoyed the most from these palettes. Okay, the next one is my Natasha Denona Lila palette, and this one, though it is newer in my collection, I definitely have like a clear standout favorite, and that would be this shade here, which is called Dragon Bite. It's this very cool, in the camera right now it looks green, but I'm telling you from the side it's like this red color, but when you swatch it, it's not too red or too green. It's almost got like this nice, it looks like almost a brown undertone. It's such a special shade. I love that shade so much. I'm so like in shock at how beautiful it is. And yes, every time I wear this palette, I'm like, okay, use something else, because you know you like Dragon Bite. But yeah, that one is definitely my favorite from this palette. So from Sultry, I definitely have a clear favorite for me, and that is definitely this Cyborg shade here. It's so beautiful. I know I've had complaints about this palette in past videos, but I still want to say, like, I do love this palette. I just wish that some of the brown tones weren't all so similar, but if they would have done a little bit more, like given us some more unique shades like Cyborg and Slate, those shades are so beautiful and so special. And yeah, that one's definitely my clear favorite from this palette. From my Violet Voss Rainbow palette, I definitely picked two shades because I didn't want to leave one of them out. The reason why I wanted this palette so much was this pink shade here called Flamingo. It's just this beautiful, vibrant, kind of cool toned almost pink, and it's beautiful. And then I was surprised pleasantly that actually after using this palette, I still love that shade, but my like one that I probably like just a smidge better is this shade down here called Pearl. It's this very cool, I mean, it looks kind of white in the pan, but it's got this really cool gold yellowy duochrome to it, almost green too. There's like a hint of green in it. I think it's so special, and those two are definitely my favorite shades from this Violet Voss Rainbow palette. As we move into the top three, you may have already noticed that these shades are not in the same order as my ranking my eyeshadows palette, so that says something that some of these shades are just standouts, even though the palette as a whole may rank something, you know, somewhere differently. But the next one comes from my Norvina palette, and I believe I swatched two shades here, and I want to say I did Soul, which is this matte. It's kind of got like a little bit of a satin sheen to it almost when you wear it, but I think it's still beautiful. The Soul shade is very beautiful. It's very cool tone, and I really like that. And then the other one that I'm so suckered in by, and I'm surprised that it's so neutral but that I love it so much, is this Dazzling shade. It's again that bronzy color, but this one's kind of special in that it has some pink reflect to it, and I just really enjoy this palette. Is my favorite in my whole collection, but I definitely enjoy those two the most. Next up is my Dose of Colors friend Keishon palette, and while you probably heard me also say that this palette gives me lots of trouble in that it's hard to work with for me, it doesn't last on my eyes very well, but at the same time, and I think this says a lot, these shades are special. And my favorite in this palette is definitely this blue one up here, and I believe it's called A Moment, and when you wear it, it is a moment. It's beautiful. It's just got this, it's got a deep base to it, which I think is what helps that glitter in it really pop, but it's also got this blue to almost purple shift, and I think it's so special. I really enjoy it. It's very beautiful. I really do love this I really do love this shade, and it makes me enjoy the whole palette, even if the palette isn't the best quality for me. And my two favorite shades are coming from this palette that actually is number 2 favorite overall in my collection. Hope I'm making sense here. I ended up swatching two colors. I did this Destiny color, which is this beautiful green matte color, and then also Electric. This Electric shade is so special to me, so beautiful. I am scared to wear it now because I'm afraid I'm gonna hit pan on it, which is ridiculous, and I'm trying to tell myself as much as I can so maybe I can break that mentality. But man, these shades overall are beautiful, but those two are definitely my favorite in this palette. And yeah, I am really obsessed with this palette. Okay, let's take a look at the swatches close up and get a nice view of what my palette looks like. The more I think about the shades I chose, the more I realize that I am definitely someone that loves neutrals, and then I love like some bright pops of color. And the more that I think back to my ranking my eyeshadows video, the more I think about those palettes that ended up in the top part of my collection, in my favorites part, were definitely palettes that are very neutral, because I'm definitely someone who wears neutrals on the day-to-day, but they have those beautiful pops of color that I just really enjoy, and they get me excited but inspire me just enough. And then yeah, I just think that it's interesting to learn that about myself. So I enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Make sure you say hello in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.